Thanks for joining me again in one of the world's best locations for photography. I'm ready, so if you're ready, let's go. Coming up on this month's show, we clean the sensor on Canon's latest flagship release, we follow a love affair with a retro camera, continue our countdown of the top 10 views on the Isle of Skye, and we find a home for this top spec carbon fibre tripod. Welcome to our extended April edition of Photography Online. I'm so glad you've managed to join me again for another action-packed programme. I know you were expecting me to be at the photography show in Birmingham, but due to the current virus situation, as is the case with most big events at the moment, that's no longer happening as scheduled. So I'm here on the Isle of Skye and Photography Online's HQ. Not a bad compromise. Now, we've got some plans to help anyone currently stuck at home with lots of time on their hands, but more on that later. Let's get this month's show underway with our first feature. If you've ever entered any of your photos into a competition, you might have wondered what the judges are looking for and what's involved in the process of choosing the winning images. Well, this month, ahead of the launch of an exciting new competition, we're going behind the scenes with the Photography Online team of experts who are all involved in the task of selecting the final 10 best photos from a recent competition.
When it comes to judging photo competitions, every judge will be looking for something slightly different. Although this is the case with ourselves, we also try to work as a team to identify the very best images from a large pool of entries.
I'm not necessarily looking for the most perfect or technical shot, but I'm really looking forward to seeing some fresh takes on some of the Skye classics.
I'm looking for images which stand out from the crowd, so ones that demand my attention, whether that be for subject matter, quality of light, whatever it is, they just want to make me linger for longer.
I'm looking for images which are technically good and ones which are not obviously overly processed. Oh, that was nice. That was going to be shortlisted. So there's nice reflected light on the rocks in the foreground here with a nice sky.
So one of the things that we get a lot of is you get a lot of entries of the same subject. So here we've got like 3 shots of store. So if ever you enter a photo into a competition and it's of a very familiar or obvious subject, you need to make sure that it stands out from all the others.
I like the light and colour in this shot, but compositionally is let down a little bit. I like the leading line, but the horizon right in the middle kind of splits the image straight in half. I would have had much less sky, which would have helped you focus on the colour a little bit, so I don't think that's going to make the short list.
So here, an image from store, different viewpoint from what you'd normally see, and not too bad an image in terms of it's got atmosphere in it, but there's lots of dust spots on the image, so if you're going to enter an image into competition, at least make sure for starter that there's no dust spots.
That's not particularly bad. There's lots of things that are good about it, but it's not strong enough to make it into the top 10.
Once we had chosen our favourite individual shots, it was then a case of getting together to argue out who had made the best decisions and finalise the top 10 images, which would be showcased for public voting on the competition website.
Right, so we've got our top 10 now. We're all in agreement on that, on the top 10?
Yeah,
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so this is the first shot, and obviously the light is stunning there.
Beautiful golden light.
Yeah, so it's about a 4-hour hike to get to this point.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that's definitely worthy of being in the top 10. Let's have a look at the next one then. So this is a location which not a lot of people know about. It's, because of the high tide, you can get cut off easily, so it's actually dangerous. But as far as the photo is concerned, you've got the beautiful silhouette going on there with the nice warm light coming through, and the foreground reflecting this pool in the foreground. Reflecting
just compositionally it's great as well.
So I think you selected this one, didn't you, Harry?
Yeah, I really like this one. I just think it's so highly unusual of a really well-known subject.
The other thing is it doesn't look contrived either.
Yeah.
That, I don't know whether it was or not, but
he's very good at posing while not posing, if so.
Exactly, because it looks very natural there. So, okay, what's the next one?
Okay, so yeah, this next one here, Talisker, really nice, lovely light, leading lines, my type of exposure here. Not mega long exposure, probably a second, 2 seconds.
By not going too long, you've obviously kept the texture in the waves over here and the sea. If it was longer than 5 seconds or so, then
just
you wouldn't be able to see the waves. But obviously it's long enough to paint the streaks in the foreground, which is what makes that shot work. So obviously the light there is what's making that, and that's what I was talking about initially. That's what I'm looking for, and just somebody capturing that burst of light through the clouds. But this looks like rain, doesn't it, falling with the backlit beam of light coming through and the clouds up at the top. It just all sort of paints drama, doesn't it? And to me, that sums up what Skye's all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so a very different viewpoint from all the other images that we've seen. It's the Old Man's Store. Probably just why it stood out, because it's not your typical viewpoint.
It's worked well in this case. It's nice.
And it's nicely framed with the foreground as well, which is what makes it work. So this is the one that I was saying that the trees stand out, because normally, as you'll know, when you normally stand here, you've got the trees behind those trees and they kind of all merge into one.
Yeah, well, perfect reflection. Yeah. Really nice to get that. You don't often see that nice layering of mist.
No.
So it's another one that I was talking about, and the comment I made that it's probably a little bit over-processed, but
I guess that's such a personal personal thing, isn't it?
It's beautiful light, as we can see, but just having that little focal point there, it gives it scale, because it's the only thing that's of known size in the frame. So without that person standing there, you're just kind of guessing as to the scale of that place. Yeah, so I picked this one out. The thing that jumps out is the tonal range. It's got so much kind of detail and 3 dimensions, doesn't it? It almost looks like you can kind of reach in and grab parts of the scene there.
It's not been taken on a super wide angle lens, which I think tends to be the instinct in a situation like this, but that would make the mountains probably too small in frame. But that really, really jumps out, and it's got such pop and clarity that I think that's what makes that shot.
So on to the last image.
Well, the light's good. But overall, it just says Skye. Doesn't it?
It ticks all the boxes, doesn't it? It's compositionally, it's pretty spot on. It's got the light, and it's got 2 interesting subjects. We've got the Koran, and we've got. I mean, who doesn't like a nice cute lamb and sheep, really?
And mint sauce.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily an easy image to get, even with a...
Oh no, yeah.
I mean, it's not taken with a mega long lens, trying to get close to the sheep, normally run off for me anyway.
Okay, so we've got our top 10. So we'll upload them to the website and see what the public think.
So over to them now.
Yep.
If you didn't follow the conclusion of the competition in November, I can tell you that the winning image was this one from Stephen Tomlinson, who won £1,000 in cash and a filter kit from Case Filters. Not bad at all. All top 10 finalists won prizes though, so well done to everyone who got involved. This year, the Sky Filter Challenge is being replaced by a new national competition. As you would have seen from some of the features in our previous shows, Scotland is one of the best countries in the world for photography. And not just landscapes either. With amazing wildlife and a rich culture, it has so much to offer the photographer. As with the Sky Filter Challenge, the new competition is all about the photo rather than the photographer, and it will be set up as a non-profit organisation which channels all profits to local charities. Scotland's Photo of the Year will be open for entries from the 11th of April right through until the 1st of November, so you've got plenty of time to send in your existing photos or to take new ones. For full details of this exciting new competition, go to scotland.photography. There's a link in the description below, plus we'll also be taking a more in-depth look at it in a future episode of Photography Online, so make sure you're subscribed and have enabled the bell icon to be notified every time we upload a new show. Now, Kit Corner is our regular monthly feature where we test and review equipment. This month we were planning on showing you the latest gear and gadgets at the photography show, but as that's no longer happening this month, Scotland's premier camera store, Ford's Photographic, stepped in with a solution.
Got a 1DX Mark II. Throw it away. There's a new bad boy in town. It's always nice when you get a call from your local specialist camera shop asking if you want to try out a new bit of gear. So when they got in touch and asked if I wanted to try the brand new Canon 1DX Mark III, I couldn't resist.
This is the one.
Amazing, thank you so much. I'll be careful with it, honestly, yeah.
Be careful, please.
The 1D series of cameras is well known really for two things. One, its blistering rate of fire. And two, its impressive autofocus capabilities. So, come down to the Cairngorms in Scotland and I'm going to try and shoot some red squirrels, which will put both those things to the test. Now, this wouldn't be a camera aimed at sports and wildlife photographers if it didn't have an impressive number of autofocus points. In total, you have 191 to choose from, with 155 of those being the more accurate cross type. Using autofocus in live view is a delight with the 1DX. When in live view, almost every pixel on the sensor is turned into one that can autofocus. It does this with incredible accuracy, tracking any obvious subject in frame quickly and precisely. So frame rate wise, we've got two options. If we're shooting through the optical viewfinder, then we hit a pretty impressive 16 frames per second. But if we flick the camera into live view, we'll get an absolutely blistering 20 frames a second. And when you've got squirrels jumping all over a shot, that's really quite handy. Just as about to happen now. Something I was quite pleased to hear about on the 1DX Mark III is that they've improved the silent shutter. The Mark II, even in silent shutter, it could be really quite loud, and when you've got sensitive wildlife, then that could be a real problem. But the silent shutter on the Mark III is a substantial improvement, especially when you flick it into live view. Externally, there are very few changes visibly to the Mark III's body in comparison to the Mark II, but a couple of notable things. We actually have a touchscreen built into the back of the camera this time. Whether you think that's a gimmick or not, I find it quite useful, especially when trying to shoot a bit of video. Now, I'm not going to delve into detail about the various options when it comes to shooting movies on the 1DX, but it's safe to say there are enough choices to satisfy even the most discerning of YouTubers. Now, Canon has stood by keeping this as a DSLR rather than investing in a more higher-end mirrorless camera, and I think that's a good choice. I've always been a fan of optical viewfinders, and when trying to shoot fast action like wildlife or sports, the optical viewfinder is just a win-win for me. Something I've always liked about Canon is their use of a simple, easy to navigate menu system that overall is the same across its whole range of cameras. The same format is employed on the new Mark III, low with a few extra pages of options. Pretty much everything on this camera is customizable. Probably the biggest change to the back of the camera is the introduction of these smart controllers. I wasn't really sure what these were going to be like to use, but essentially they are extra sensitive little joysticks that we can use to move the focus points around the screen. I actually really do like them. They're very intuitive, they're quite sensitive, and they work much quicker than the more traditional joystick. Another noticeable change is to the battery life. Now, it's actually the same battery as you'll find in the 1DX Mark II, but they've managed to squeeze double the life out of it, so the figures say, which, if it holds up, that's pretty bloody impressive. While primarily aimed at sports and wildlife photographers, the 1DX Mark III is also very capable when it comes to shooting landscapes. In an age of high megapixel counts, it's easy to forget that a seemingly lowly sensor size of 20 megapixels is still more than enough for great landscapes and good quality prints. A great test for any camera's autofocus system and its accuracy is trying to shoot birds in flight, so I've come to try and shoot some red kites. I think I managed to nail something out there, but I've retreated from a bit of stormy weather. Now, the weather was no problem for the camera, of course, as like all the other 1D series, this camera is built like an absolute tank. It's fully weather sealed and it can take pretty much anything you can throw at it. All the water is just shed right off. Oh, I've cleaned the sensor. With an ISO range expandable up to 819,200, the 1DX Mark III's noise capabilities are very, very impressive. Like all the 1D predecessors, it has of course built-in controls for shooting in vertical format. That includes this new smart controller. It really just helps to speed up your workflow when you're switching from landscape to portrait orientation with fast moving wildlife. So what was it actually like shooting some fast moving wildlife? Well, matter of fact, it pretty much nailed everything. I was really trying to throw the camera off by focusing on low contrast backgrounds. That's normally a really tricky thing for a camera to do, but that's what this thing was built for. I nailed pretty much every single shot as the red kites dived and flew around. So very, very impressive. Let's be frank, the 1DX Mark III is not a cheap camera. It's going to retail for around £6,500, and that's a lot of money even for a pro-level photographer. So why would you rush out to buy one in favour of something like your 5D Mark IV or another brand equivalent? Well, this is a no-compromise machine. If you want something that's going to go out in any weather, is tough, pretty much unbreakable, then it's the camera for you. It is blisteringly fast, hardly anything is going to throw this off, so it really is the best machine out there at the moment. So if that's what you need, then you've got to spend the money.
Thanks again to Fords for loaning us the camera, and apologies again, it was a little bit wet when you got it back. Now, as well as supplying new camera equipment, Fords are also one of the world's biggest suppliers of used camera kits. They ship all over the world, and we've put a description for you to check them out in the link below. Now, speaking of used camera kits, one of our Photography Online experts recently scratched a very long-awaited itch.
In this box lies an ambition, because what's inside is something that I've wanted for many years, and I mean many years. But this is so much more than a box, so don't think that this is one of those ridiculous unboxing videos. Why do people do that, by the way? Because this is more like a time capsule, because what's inside comes from an era when the world was a simpler place. An era when we only had 4 television channels to choose from, and you didn't need a password for everything that you did in life. And if you wanted to phone a help desk, you actually got through to a human being with an understandable accent. And it was a time when cameras only had 3 controls: focus, aperture, and exposure time. And it begs the question, does it need to be any more complicated than that? Look at this beauty. Excuse us while we get to know each other for a little while. How you doing? Has anyone ever told you you've got beautiful curves? So, come here often? Okay, grab your coat, you've pulled. You see, this is to me a very special camera. When I first started making a living from photography, this was right at the top of my wish list of gear to buy. But something unapologetically jumped the queue. Something in the form of this monster. And this became my main workhorse camera. And this here kind of got forgotten about. But it's been 20 years in the making, and we're finally together. So I thought I'd do a feature about this camera here. However, I can tell you're still looking at that camera there. So we're going to take that off the table. We'll do a feature on that another time. But today, I want to talk to you about this camera, the Fuji GW690 III. For those of you who are new to photography since the digital era, I want to explain to you what's so good about this camera. So let me start by telling you that this is a film camera. There's no screens, no menus, no functions, no on-off button. No on-off button, you heard me correctly. This camera takes no batteries whatsoever. It's the very definition of simplicity. In fact, if you look up the word simplicity in the dictionary, you will see it says Fuji GW690. So you might be asking, if this has no batteries, what does it run on? The answer is quite simple. It runs on passion, it runs on enthusiasm, on devotion. You might even say it runs on lust, because if you have none of those, this ain't gonna work for you. So let me tell you what this camera is all about. It's a medium format camera, which means it takes this type of film here. And this type of film is 6 centimeters tall, and it's about 70 centimeters long. So if you pull that out, measure that part of the film, it will be about 70 centimeters. And there's lots of different formats of camera which take this film. This one here, because it's a 690, it means that the image area that it uses is 6 centimeters tall and 9 centimeters wide. So it's kind of that shape there. But there's lots of different medium format cameras that use different amounts of film. It's not like a 35mm camera where every single frame is the same size. So let's just get this beast back on the table here. This camera also takes the same film, but it just uses much more of the film for one exposure. So in this camera here, we get 8 exposures before the film runs out. This camera here will only take 4 exposures before the film's used up. Expensive stuff. What I love about this camera though, is that unlike most medium format ratios, the 6:9 gives the same ratio as modern digital cameras. So it's the one that we're most familiar with. So what I have here is basically a 35mm camera on some serious steroids, because although the ratio is the same as a full frame digital camera, it gives an image area over 5 times the size. And as we all know, size matters. Sensor or film size has many influences over the resulting image, but for now, I'm just going to concentrate on definition, otherwise we'll be here all day. If you take a photo on your phone, the sensor is tiny. If you look at the size of that on an A4 piece of paper, if you wanted to take a picture on your phone and blow it up, enlarge it, print it at A4, you're going to need to enlarge it by 66 times. That means you're magnifying all the imperfections of the lens and the sensor to a huge degree. If you have a micro four thirds sensor, then that means that your sensor is that big there. And in order to get that to produce a print on an A4 piece of paper, you're going to have to enlarge it by 16 times. That's still a huge amount. Continuing upwards, we get to the APS size sensor, which, although it doesn't have a set size because it varies from camera to camera, looks roughly like that, and it's about 22mm wide, meaning that to get a print A4, you're going to have to magnify it by around 13 times. If you have a full frame camera, then your sensor will be 36mm wide. It will look like that, requiring an enlargement of only 8 times to get a print to A4. Now let's look at the sensor size or film area of this bad boy. You only need to enlarge that by just over 3 times to get a print to A4 size. This means we're asking less of the lens and less of the sensor, or in this case the film, and the result is an image with much better definition, impact and overall oomph. Putting it another way, if we enlarge an image taken on this camera by the same amount that we'd need to get a phone image up to A4, we'd end up with a print a whopping 6 meters wide. That's twice the size of this bad boy. As this is basically a top-end rangefinder camera giving the classic 3:2 ratio, but on a massive scale, it's been dubbed the Texas Leica. But will it rodeo like a boss, or is it going to be all hat and no cattle? Time to put on a check shirt, saddle up and take it out into the wilderness. Yeehaw!
Dare I say it, but part 2 of that feature will be coming up later on in the show. I dread to think what lies in wait, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. Now, I'm sure the current virus situation is affecting you wherever you are in the world. The Photography Online experts have had lots of cancelled workshops due to people being unable to fly to the UK, and they aren't able to get abroad to run their planned trips over the coming months either. With you guys maybe sitting at home, maybe itching to do something with your camera, and our guys sitting here with lots of time on their hands, we've had a brainstorming session, and I've come up with the idea of offering online workshops where we can teach you from your home. We're still finalising details for this, but let us know in the comments below if this is something you think you might be interested in. We're all in this situation together, and the way forward, certainly over the coming months, is to work around the new restrictions and adapt accordingly. If you can't get to us and we can't get to you, then it seems sensible to do something online which keeps us busy and continues the progression of your photography. Now, if you've been following our previous shows, you'll hopefully be enjoying our countdown series of the top 10 views on the Isle of Skye right here on the west coast of Scotland. If you've missed any, where have you been? Don't forget to check them out. Let's continue our countdown with location number 7, but just for you this month we've squeezed in a couple of bonus views along the way.
One of the main attractions for both photographers and hikers who visit Skye is an area known as the Quiraing. It's a unique landscape formed by Europe's largest landslide, which is continuing to move today. This entire area of Skye is formed by volcanic rock lying on a sandstone bed. This bedrock isn't firm enough to support the volcanic deposits on top, so they are slowly slipping away to the east. More of that later.
Any visit to the Quiraing is most likely to start here at the upper car park. Luckily, I'm already at 250 metres above sea level, so most of the climbing aspect has already been done in the car.
A clearly defined path leads north from the car park and the world-class views start almost immediately. "90% of visitors here don't actually make it to the Quiraing, as they are satisfied with the epic views just a couple of hundred metres from the car park. This is not actually the Quiraing, as it lies a mile to the north, and it's our number 7 top 10 viewpoint on Skye. After heading north for about 10 minutes, you'll reach this gully, which can be a little awkward to negotiate, but as long as you take care, then it shouldn't be a problem for most people. The path continues climbing gently but revealing ever more impressive views, which will have you stopping every few metres to take photos.
When you reach this big rock formation here called the Prison, the path gets a little bit steeper. However, it does give you a sense of where we're heading to, which is up there.
The temptation is to head straight up between the impressive rocks which will now be above you, but if you follow my route, there's an easier way up and we'll end up coming back down that way, so you won't miss any views. Continue to the north until you reach this point.
Now, we're all familiar with the phrase, no pain, no gain. Well, sadly, this is where we're going to have to apply this. We're going to climb about 150 metres, so let's get it over and done with quickly.
We're ultimately heading for a hidden area known as the Table, but I'm keen to show you another couple of locations which you'll need to pass, so consider this a 3-in-1 bonus. The first viewpoint I'm going to show you is one which the Photography Online team discovered a few years ago and named it Breathless Point, partly for the fact when you arrive you'll be totally breathless.
What are you talking about?
And for the views which are, well, breathtaking.
You can't deny this is an amazing view. It's such a unique landscape, you won't find it anywhere else in the world.
This view works all year round, but only in the morning. During the winter months, the sun will be in your 5 o'clock position. This wouldn't usually be desirable, but at this location it shines through a small gap in the rocks to illuminate the wall on the right, the only time in the year when you can get decent light on the foreground. Once you've bagged a few shots at Breathless Point, continue up the steep path. Other views will tempt you to get the camera out again, so this is the kind of location which just keeps giving.
So I'm now at the base of the table, which is just over here, and that's as high as we're going to go. It's quite tricky to get to from this side, so we're going to go on the other side and sneak in through the back door.
The appeal of the table is that it doesn't reveal itself until you literally step foot onto it. I love bringing people here and watching their reaction as they step onto this hidden plateau guarded by imposing peaks in all directions. Very few people come here, so you can expect to have the place to yourself. There are views to both the north and the south, so take your pick depending on what the light is doing.
Standing here, you get a real sense of Europe's largest landslip, which has created the unique landscape you see around me. This plateau used to be up there as part of the ridge. However, the underlying support is falling away to the east, causing this table to drop down. You can get a real sense of this from up in the air.
Each year, the table drops by around 1 centimetre, so the longer you leave it before you visit, the less you'll have to climb. We now need to head back to the car park, but there's one more surprise before we rejoin the path we took on the way here. Rather than retracing our steps, we're going to see an impressive rock formation which is often mistaken in photos for Skye's most iconic landmark, the Old Man of Storr, which is actually 10 miles to the south.
As you crest this ridge, you get your first view of the Needle. However, the walk down from here is quite steep, so it's not really for those who are uncomfortable with heights. Luckily, that's not me.
Due to the marbly texture of the ground, the path is far more slippery when dry than it is when damp or wet.
This location doesn't work in the summer because by the time the light hits the Needle, the sun's too high in the sky and the light's too harsh. It works best between September and April, just after dawn.
When you finish taking your award-winning shots of the Needle, continue down the path which gets less steep from here following the base of the cliff. There are frequent rock falls from these cliffs, so don't stop for a picnic at the base of the wall. Keep moving towards the south until you see the car park come into view. Shortly after this, the path will dogleg back to the north and down to join the main path you came in on. From here, it's just a case of retracing your steps back to the car, continuing to admire what must be some of the best views anywhere in the world.
Wow, Nick. I mean, if that doesn't make you want to visit Skye, I do not know what will. And if you are planning visiting the island with your camera, then I'd highly recommend this. It's the Photographer's Guide to Skye, written by one of our experts and available in both hard copy and digital at the link below. If you're watching on a phone or a tablet, press this down arrow to access the link. If you're viewing on a computer, then press this show more icon. If you're watching on a smart TV, then good luck, because quite frankly, we couldn't figure that one out either. Do let us know if you find out how to do it. Now, every show we feature a quote of the month, and this month's is from Percy W. Harris, who once said, "Skill in photography is acquired by practice, not by purchase," which brings us very nicely into this month's essential camera skills.
One of the most important camera skills is focusing. This causes quite a lot of confusion as a lot of focus crosses into the boundary of depth of field. For this video though, I'm just going to focus on the actual focusing. See what I did there? Now, before we go any further, we have to understand one concept when it comes to focusing. Most lenses, at least most lenses that we're going to use commonly, are designed to deliver a flat plane of focus. Now, before you avid physicists start commenting, I know this field capture, I know. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to assume that the plane of focus is flat and parallel to the camera. Basically, we need to imagine an invisible wall parallel to the camera's sensor. Anything at the exact distance of this wall will be sharp, and anything closer or further away won't be truly sharp. All lenses have a minimum focusing distance. If it's a telephoto lens like this one, well, let's have a look. This will focus as close as 1.2 meters. If you have a wide angle lens, this will go down to 28 centimeters, meaning we can bring that invisible wall much closer to the camera. Hopefully you can now visualize that wall moving forwards and backwards. I'm now going to refer to it by its proper name, the plane of focus. At the other end of the scale, regardless of their focal length, all lenses can focus at infinity. Now, one of the most common questions I get asked when running workshops is, where does infinity start? That's a question with quite a complicated answer as it relies on focal length. For now, let's just think about infinity as being really far away from the camera. And despite what Buzz says, you can't go beyond infinity. So first up, let's talk about single shot focus. On my Canon, this is known as one-shot autofocus, and it's best suited to static subjects. So this could be architecture, portraits, or in this case, landscapes. Now, it's really simple. Once you've selected how many focus points you want to use, simply half press the shutter button and it will lock on to whatever distance you focused on. You can then move the camera around and recompose your shot to your heart's content. As long as you keep that button half pressed, it will stay focused, and I often do that when I'm hand holding the camera and shooting landscapes. We've just been interrupted by an eagle flying overhead, but it's the perfect time to demonstrate continual focusing. Now, as the name suggests, continual focusing allows us to continually track the movement of a subject. On Canon, it's known as AI Servo, on Nikon, AFC, but they do the same thing. Once we've selected the number of focus points we'd like to use, I'd probably suggest a small group in the center of frame. Once you depress the shutter button halfway and the camera's locked onto your subject, it should continually track the movement forwards and backwards no matter where it moves. The accuracy of that focus though varies massively depending on the camera and lens combination. So let's give it a go and see if we can get this eagle. Now the last method of focusing we could use is manual focusing. The advantage of manual focusing is that we can be 100% accurate in where we want to focus in the scene. If we leave it to the camera, it might be slightly off. Now, the easiest way to manual focus is with a static scene on a tripod, and we can use our live view. Now, you've got to be confident that you've got a really clear, detailed live view, otherwise you can't be 100% accurate. If you do, then bring up live view, zoom into your image, then we can magnify and select where we want to focus in the scene, zoom in, and then use our manual focus ring to adjust the focus until we're 100% happy. There we are. Perfect. Manual focusing can also be a useful tool for wildlife photographers. If you've got an animal that's surrounded by vegetation or behind trees, then it could be hard for autofocus to lock on. What we can do instead is manually focus, and then we can make sure the eye is pin sharp. Now, as a bonus tip for you, a lot of people are not that confident at focusing through a viewfinder while manual focusing. But a lot of people don't realise we can adjust a little something on the side of the camera called our diopter. And this adjusts how sharp the viewfinder piece is, but it has to be adjusted for each person's individual eye. Make sure you do that and you should be a lot more confident. One final point to understand is how our cameras actually autofocus. In order for the camera to lock on, it requires contrast. If we point at an area with no contrast or with deep shadows, an area such as blue sky for example, then the camera might start to hunt, where the focus just keeps moving forwards and backwards and it can't lock on. If this happens, simply point your camera to an area with more contrast and then recompose your image or manually focus.
Thanks, Harry. As always, really useful information. Next month, we're looking at depth of field, a topic which I admit causes me a fair amount of confusion, so really looking forward to that one. Now, in this month's 60-second editing skills, Nick shows us how to simplify the process of editing large batches of images in Adobe Lightroom by using a numbering system.
This month I'm going to show you how to rate your images in Lightroom. What I mean by this is, say you have a selection of 50 images, for instance, of the same subject, but you need to whittle them down for printing or for your website. So over here in Lightroom I have 49 images from the same location, this really nice sunset scene on the islands of St Kilda. So one way you can do this is using the star system, where you rate your images from 1 through to 5. So I'm going to scroll through my images here and give them a rating of, say, 2. That just says to me that I want to keep these for now and go back to them. Moving on to the next image. Now that one's pretty good, so I'm going to give that a rating of 2. That one's okay, I'll give that one a rating of 1. Now what I want to do is filter these images that I've just rated so I can whittle them down even more. In the bottom right hand corner of your Lightroom screen here, you have this drop down menu here, and I select Rated. So as you can see now we have 8 images of 49 selected. So I'm going to go through these ones again. Yeah, I really like that one. Yeah, like that one. That one, which I initially give a 1, I don't think so. So I'm going to give that a non-rating. So all you do is select 0. That one I don't like so much now, so 0. So you get the idea, you can just go through them and give them new ratings. So now I'm going to view anything that's greater than or equal to 2, and just keep going through them until you've got the 1, 2, 3 that you're really happy with. Now there's other ways that you can rate your images, such as using colour flags, but that's for another time. For now, my 60 seconds is up.
Thanks, Nick. That'll certainly help me out next time I'm editing a batch of photos. Now it's the moment we've all been dreading. Last time we left Marcus and his medium format Fuji camera, dubbed the Texas Leica. He was dressed as a cowboy. All we can do is hope for the best and prepare for the worst. Now, let's just get on with it.
Oh! Right, that's it. Whose bloody idea was this anyway? Stupid cowboy theme. I'm supposed to be doing a feature on this. Cow, stop the music. Stop it, stop. Okay. All right, I'm taking off the bandana, I'm taking off the hat, I'm taking off the shirt. All right, maybe I'll leave the shirt. Okay, let's just get on with this. So now we've stopped being silly, we can get on with the serious stuff of actually seeing what this camera can do. So, film camera obviously, so we're going to put some film in it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a picture of the old building here. This is actually an old post office. So it's about 100 years old and it looks suitably decayed. Nice texture on the paintwork and everything. And I've got a range of different black and white films and also some colour films. Looking at the sky at the moment, I think we're probably safer to go with the colour because there's more cloud around than there is blue sky. So I'm going to load some colour film. So you can see that that's now being taken up by the spool. And then sooner or later we'll get an arrow here. And there's an arrow on the top of the camera there. We need to line those two arrows up approximately like that. That's when you have to close the camera. So the camera's now closed. And now what I do is I keep winding, and then the camera will, now it's locked. So that's now frame 1 ready to go. This camera has no meter in it, so you need one of these, separate handheld meter. So the reason why you need to remember the film is because we need to put the ISO into here. So with the ISO, I'm going to set that to 160, because that's the rating of the film. And now this will tell me my exposure. Okay, so as I'm walking around here, I'm noticing this fence here, which is quite nice. So I'm going to hop over the other side of the fence and see if I can include that in the foreground. Yeah, so right here is working really nicely, but it's really important that the fence post is not covering the window or the door, so it's between the two. And that's where I need to remember that there's a slight parallax error between the viewfinder and the lens. So where I've got the camera positioned at the moment is absolutely perfect when I'm looking through the viewfinder, but obviously the lens is slightly further to the right. So what I'm going to need to do now is position the camera just a couple of inches to the left so that the lens is where the viewfinder was. And now if I look through the viewfinder, the post is not in the right position, but I just have to remember that the lens is now in the right position. Everything else is good to go. While we're waiting for the light, let me show you inside here. It used to be the old post office. So if you come inside, you have to imagine I'm the postmaster. Would you like that first class or second class, sir? This is quite interesting as well. Look, there's a phone booth here. So it's before the days of landlines in people's houses. They would have had a little privacy thing here. Look, so if you were talking to your bank manager, you'd close that. Up there is a price list of telephone charges. Look at the texture on the paintwork here. You can't create that, only the elements and time will do that. Oh, here comes the hail. While we're waiting for this shower to pass, I just thought I'd tell you a bit more about the camera. I brought it into the shelter here because it's getting quite wet, and unlike modern cameras it's not weather sealed, but it is mirrorless. The aperture range goes from f5.6 right down to f32, so normally I would be using this at 11 to sort of 22, that kind of range. And then the exposure time goes from 1 second, or T is like a bulb mode, so you can go as long as you want on that, but the automatic modes are from 1 second down to 500th of a second. You can't go any faster than that, but on medium format you normally don't need to anyway. We've got a fixed lens on this camera which is 65mm, which is equivalent of about 28mm on a full frame camera. You can get a longer lens, but because the lenses don't detach, you need to buy a new camera as well. So they do two versions of this camera, one with a 90mm lens and this one with a 65. We've also got a spirit level on here. Now this is, as you can see, the version 3 of this camera. There were 3 versions of it in total. The first version didn't have the spirit level, and it didn't have this lens hood either. And this lens hood's stupid, if you want my opinion, because it doesn't detach, and it prevents you from using filters, because in order to use filters you'd have to have the lens hood right back like that. But when you have the lens hood back, you can't then access the aperture and the shutter speed settings. So it's a pain in the arse, because you need to put the filter on after you've set all the exposure, and then if the exposure changes or you want to use a different aperture, filters off, change the settings, put the filters back on again. It's a big faff. So that's definitely a downside to this camera, but it's pretty much the only downside I know. But if you don't like that, then you can just get the original version of the camera. So rather than the Mark III, you get the Mark I, because it doesn't have this stupid lens hood. Okay, the rain stopped, so let's get back to where we were. So the focusing is quite easy because when you look through the viewfinder, you get what's called a split level view. It's a little window in the middle, and as you turn the focus ring on the lens here, you get two images which kind of move like that and they come together. And all you need to do is twist the focus until both of the images come together to form one image. So for this shot here, obviously I want to focus on the post office itself. It's very easy to do because it's got lots of texture on it, so it's easy to line up the vertical lines. But I'm using f22, which is going to give me enough depth of field to get this foreground fence also sharp. So now it's just a case of pressing this button and watching your bank account go down. Okay, so hold your breath, here we go. And that's done. So I'm just going to do a couple of different angles, maybe a close-up and try and get the texture of the paintwork. The sun's going round and it's going to be off the front of this building very soon, so I need to work quite fast here. There's a potential shot here with just the door, one door and one window. Okay, here goes another £2. One of the things I love about film photography is the whole jeopardy of not knowing what you've got. So I've taken 2 shots so far and I won't know if I've done anything wrong or if they're any good until probably 2 or 3 days time when I got the film developed. But the upside of that is that it's forcing me to think everything through, because the cost of making a mistake with film is so much more drastic than if you make a mistake with digital. So this is what's going to force you to slow down, be more considerate and pay attention to things like the light and focus and exposure. And it's just going to basically hone your photography skills in a much better way than digital will. So get ready to spend another £2. Way of thinking about it is every time you press this, it costs you a cup of coffee or a cake. But as I'm on a diet at the moment, I don't like coffee, this is the perfect way to spend my £2.
I love that simplified form of photography. I've actually just bought a medium format film camera myself, but I don't have much clue what I'm doing. I do hope one of the experts will be able to show me the ropes and we'll record it for a future show. Now it's time for a brand new feature that I had an idea for recently. Very often when I'm around the guys and they're talking photography, I wish I could just record them because they offer great insight into all their various thoughts on photography. So I came up with the idea to send them down the pub with a sealed envelope with a topic of my choice and give them 3 minutes to talk about it. Let's join them by the open fire.
Okay, so here's our envelope, Harry. Falling at the final hurdle, poor editing, discuss.
Yeah, well that's
a big thing for both of us, I guess, isn't it?
Well, I think we have a similar view on it, and I think that might clash with maybe what a lot of people do when they're actually editing an image. And I love being outside. I mean, I'm a wildlife and nature photographer because I enjoy going out and taking pictures. So the idea of sitting and spending 2 or 3 hours processing an image, that just doesn't appeal to me. I mean, that just feels really boring.
I think even you've mentioned recently about images you've seen on Instagram. I think Old Man of Storr, where they put the Glenfinnan Viaduct into the image.
Oh God! Yeah.
Okay, the original photographer mentions that it's fine art, and his profile is fine art, but then when that gets shared by a Scottish Instagram account,
quite a well-known account,
but they don't mention that. Well,
it's just misleading. That piece got me particular because it was shared.
Yeah.
as though it was a photograph.
Yeah, by a Scottish Instagram
Yeah, well,
account,
and just
for promoting Scotland.
Promoting it as a picture, and so there was all these people kind of commenting, just being, wow, what an amazing scene! I can't wait to come and see this in real life. And it's just like, well, it doesn't exist in real life. It's a fictional creation. So
I had one probably last year, the year before. It was an image which I sort of recognised the location, but then I didn't. It made me question it. But it was definitely the Cooling, and it had a white cottage in it. I don't know if I mentioned it yourself. I know I mentioned it to Marcus. I even like, Marcus, where is this?
Yeah.
And Marcus was like, that doesn't exist.
Oh, they put a cottage into the picture.
Yeah. And I messaged the person in question. We won't name names. That's not what we're here for. And they initially denied doing it. And it wasn't until I pushed and pushed, saying, look, I live on Skye. This is not what I see when I drive down that road. And then they eventually came clean. But they didn't, mention on Instagram that this was digital art. This was a composite image.
Yeah, I for one tend to never clone elements out of a photograph. It depends on the purpose. If you go somewhere, maybe it's the only time you're ever going to go to said location, and you've got this idea for a picture in your head, and you go to the location, and it might be good, it might be decent, it might be crap, but you want that picture with the perfect light. I guess that might be good enough reason to take the image back onto the computer and maybe just edge that saturation slider. Just, high 30s,
you're stretching
40s.
That might a bit there. And for me, no. And I'm guessing for you, no, as well.
Probably not.
If I'm at the location, I've flown 1,000 miles wherever, to get an image, it doesn't happen. For me, it just doesn't happen. I'm not going to add something in that wasn't there. That's just my ethos.
I agree there. I think if you've not quite gotten it right that first time, then you just got to go back and try again, or just accept that it wasn't right. But I think that's part and parcel of landscape photography. I think we better drink up.
Yeah. All right. Cheers.
It's good to see the guys weren't on the whiskey, otherwise that would have been an expensive idea I might have regretted. Okay, it is giveaway time. Last month we set a question to win this Pro Spec carbon fibre travel tripod worth £325 from Kingjoy. This is a brand our experts use at Photography Online, and although you might not have heard of Kingjoy, they make a huge amount of the world's tripods. This is simply their own brand, which represents their highest quality products. This one is ultralight, compact, super sturdy, and comes with both rubber and spiked feet. The centre column is also removable, and the leg with a rubber grip removes to become either a monopod or a walking pole. Now, unsurprisingly, we had thousands of entries, so here we go. We're going to draw a winner once again, and there can only be one. This time we've got our high-tech system set up again, so I'm a rubbish shot just like last time, and I think I've been told I've got to close my eyes again, so here we go. Oh, I did hit it again. I'm on a roll. Congratulations to Dario Vuka something-novich. Well done, this top spec carbon fibre tripod is on its way to you. If you'd like to grab one of these for yourself, although you'll need to pay for it, there is a link in the description below. If you've enjoyed the show, then please show your appreciation for the production team who work tirelessly behind the scenes by giving us a thumbs up. It helps us to know that we're doing things right. Also help spread the word by telling your friends and colleagues about us. The bigger the audience, the more resources we'll have to produce better shows in the future. I do hope you're not suffering too much in these testing times that we all seem to be in right now. We are working on new ideas to increase the amount of content we can provide to help you pass the time if you are stuck at home. We'll get through this together. Next month we'll be following a Scottish elopement photographer as she battles all kinds of weather to document couples tying the knot. I really hope you can join us for that. Until then, take good care, but most of all, take good photos.